Good Shabbos, everyone. I hope this video and message finds you all well and safe. And we have the great privilege of reading not one parsha, but two parshios this Shabbos, Parshas Chukas and Parshas Balak. And if there's ever a week and a parsha that is so aptly named, it's Parshas Chukas, because Chuk, as we know, is a mitzvah, but it's a mitzvah that goes beyond human comprehension. It goes beyond what we are capable of understanding. And in so many parts of this parsha of Chukas that the Torah relates are parts of events that are difficult to understand, mitzvos that are difficult to understand, in Paraduma, that the Torah declares, Zois Chukas HaTorah. It's not just the chok of Paraduma, but it's the chok of the entire Torah, because it's representative of that chok that goes beyond our understanding. And it's not comprehensible. As much as we try to understand, we can't. In fact, the wisest of all men, Shlomo HaMelech, declared, Omarti echkema v'hi rechoka mimeni. I tried to understand, and he was referring specifically to Paraduma. I tried to understand it, v'hi rechoka mimenu. Even the wisest man who ever lived can declare and say that there are things that go beyond our understanding. It's not contrary to logic, it's not contrary to human thought, but it is logical that it is beyond my comprehension, that only the Almighty, the Creator of all, the knower of all things, can really understand and comprehend these mitzvos. And as this whole parsha is identified with this word of chukas, of a chok, of what's not comprehensible to us humans, and certainly it is comprehensible to the Almighty, it's those events that are related besides Paraduma in this week's Sedra. We have the passing of one of the great heroines, the great tzadekes, Miriam HaNeviah, who was the hero who saved Moshe Rabbeinu as just a young girl, who was a Neviah, a spiritual person who communicated with the Almighty while she was just a little girl, till her age that was older, of course, than Moshe Rabbeinu, and she was his older sister. And this is the great Miriam HaNeviah that we find that after she passed away, there was a terrible crisis that ensued, because that life-sustaining well that the Jewish people enjoyed after she passed away was taken away. And it took the efforts of Moshe and Aaron to reinstate that well. But there was a crisis. And that certainly is a remarkable thing, that from that time we found out that it was only the merit of this tzadekes, this great woman, that the Jewish people were sustained all of those 40 years, being given the life-sustaining force of the sweet water that followed them miraculously wherever they went. And when she passed away, everyone found out the value of a Miriam HaNeviah. And it's difficult to understand in the whole idea of death. This is the most difficult things to kind of try to wrap your mind around, especially when it occurs to great and righteous people who are good. And these are things that also are part of the chukas, of what's not comprehensible to us all. And we have also the event as Moshe and Aaron that tried to reinstate the water, and yet they didn't act in the most appropriate way, as God says, that because they hit the rock instead of speaking to the rock, so they diminished in some way the sanctification of God and the lessons that they could have convey to the Jewish people, but it was a lost opportunity. And because of that oversight, God says that you didn't have that full belief to perform it fully, like the Sheni Lein B'nai Yisrael, to sanctify my name in front of the Jews. And so they were barred from entering the land of Israel. And they, Aaron first, and then in this week's Sedra, and then Moshe Rabbeinu, that they would be forced to have their souls pass from this world and go to the next, and to die as a result of Mei Meriva. And you look at this Aveira, and it's almost incomprehensible. You don't understand what really, and the Mefarshim are all trying to understand what really was their sin. And this again is Chukas. This is something that it seems, as Shlomo HaMelech says, Amarti echkema. We thought, we could somehow have an understanding. And we have also the passing of Aaron HaKohen. And with his passing, the cessation of the protecting shield of the Anani HaKavod, the clouds of glory that we commemorate with the holiday of Sukkos, and that the clouds on top and all on the sides, that was the self-contained, temperature-controlled environment of protection and of rejuvenation that would clean clothes and allow for the clothes to grow on the participants. It was a miraculous thing. It was a cloud by day and a warm, light glow at night. And this was of the miraculous. And this, with Aaron's passing, everyone found out that the Anani HaKavod, just as the Be'eru Shel Miriam was because of Miriam, they found out the greatness of Aaron HaKohen. And with it, there was an attack by our enemies. They saw that we were missing that iron dome of their day, that protection shield of the Anani HaKavod, and they thought we were vulnerable and the Jewish people had to go to battle. And the battles we fought, and Baruch Hashem, the victories against Sichon and Og, and of the Canaanim that attacked us, and yet this is all a Parshas Chukas, and also Parshas Bilam of Balak, and to try to understand why it should be that such an evil person like Bilam should be given such enormous power, such enormous understanding, and that God would allow him, even though he refused him to consort and to collaborate with Balak, that with the enemy, and yet Hashem was there to save us. And every time Bilam opened his mouth, God substituted his words. Instead of, God forbid, that would harm us, was there to give us eternal blessing. A beautiful nevuah that God emanated from the mouth, such a horrible and repugnant individual, and yet he was an instrument of bringing great blessing, even though his intent was evil. And at the end of the parsha, we find that he didn't give up Bilam, and he gave that idea to Balak to have the women, the young girls of Midian entice the men of Israel for Aveira, and there was another crisis. And thousands died because of Magefa, and it was the heroism of a young man named Pinchas, the grandson of Aaron HaKohen, who risked his life, and because of his sacrifice and his act of heroism, that in next week's Sedra, God will praise and give him the eternal blessing, that the whole of the nation of the Jewish people were not consumed by this terrible plague, but rather were saved, and it was arrested. And as Aaron HaKohen saved the Jewish people from plague in last week's Sedra, after the Korach incident, it was Pinchas who also did the same. He did like his Zayda, he did like his grandfather. And to tie all of this together, is there a one central theme? And even though it's Chukas, and even though so many parts of these two parshas are difficult for us to understand, the ideas that go beyond us of Tuma and Tahara, of Paraduma, how it should work. It's difficult to understand this idea of death, even to such righteous and wonderful people. It's difficult for us to understand how could death visit a great man like Aaron HaKohen, that we read last week, that he was able to fight with the Malach HaMovis himself, and he emerged victorious. He ruled over the Malach HaMovis. He told the Malach HaMovis what to do, and yet death comes to, as they say, to us all. And when it was Aaron HaKohen's time, he also had to pass from the world, and he had to concede to that Malach. And we are told that he didn't even have to deal with the Malach, but it was a Mises Neshika, that the Almighty himself came and kissed Aaron HaKohen with the beautiful, endearing passing of one of his neshama from this world to the next. And it's difficult for us to understand all of this, but I think there is an exceedingly important message. And that message is one message throughout this entire parsha of Chukas, and in Balak, in the incidents of Bilam and with Pinchas. And that message is, I think, the Chukas HaTorah. That, you would think it really wouldn't make sense, but the truth is it works, and it's true, and you might not understand it, but it's true. So what is that message? And the message is that one person can make a difference. That one person's neshama, his soul, by his life or her life, can make a difference for all the world around him or her. And if one lives their life in the proper way, then you don't even realize the blessing that comes to an entire world. You can change, and you could save an entire generation beyond you, and goes even beyond your generation. You find that this is the idea of paraduma. Because the idea is that you take the ashes and you have the mechatas, the special water, and you sprinkle it on someone who's tameh, and then they are allowed again to go again to the Beis Hamikdash. They're allowed. They change from tameh, from defilement, into the state of purity if you do it in the right way. And all it takes, as the pasuk says, is v'hiza hatar ala tameh. One person who's tahar can sprinkle it, and if they sprinkle it, they can affect tahara for one person, for two people, for three people, for 100, for 1,000, for 10,000, for 1,000,000. All you need is one person. Tahar echad, the Yerushalmi says, is maza al kama tmeim. And that is the idea of Zeis Chukas HaTorah. And we find it by Miriam. I mean, who really thought that this very righteous lady, who probably was being the Ezras Noshim, saying Tillim, and, people would go to her for blessings, but, that the whole reason that the Jewish people were sustained was because of this lady? You had a Moshe, you had an Aaron, you had Nachshon ben Aminadab, you have Kalei ben Yefuna, you have Yeshua ben Nun, you had all of the tzaddikim of that time. And their zchus wasn't enough to be able to provide their merit, to be able to provide life-sustaining water every single day of the 40 years of the entire nation. And God recognized that it wasn't a Nachshon, and it wasn't a Moshe, and it wasn't an Aaron, but it was Miriam HaNaviah. People who think that just because the men, they are the ones that run the davening, but the ladies, they're secondary or they're not as important. The fact is that it's so not true. And that and that we just have different jobs. And that just like Miriam was that tzadekes who sustained an entire generation, an entire world, it's these tzidkanios, whether they be male or female, who are on the highest level close to Hashem. And they don't have to run the davening. And they can be where they are and doing what they do and be that tzadekes that everyone looks to, everyone is nurtured from, and the whole world is sustained from just being the wonderful person they are. They don't have to be like anyone but themselves. This is what Miriam teaches us. This is what Aaron teaches us, that he was the tzaddik, that literally was the iron dome that protected the Jewish people. And this is, in essence, what Moshe Rabbeinu is. And this is who Pinchas is too, at the end of our Sedra, that it's a Pinchas. It is this Pinchas who took on himself to fight the fight for Hashem. And because of his actions, he saved the entire Jewish people. And what a difference, one person, one hero, who is devoted, who is pure, who means genuinely with goodness to serve Hashem. And I think that's the Chukas HaTorah. It might be almost incomprehensible to recognize, but the truth is, it's true. And that's the way it is. Zois Chukas HaTorah. And this is the Navi Micha who speaks to us in this week's Haftorah. And the end of that Haftorah, the Navi Micha tells us really what God ultimately wants from all of us. And this is what the Chafetz Chaim begins his Sefer to talking about what the Navi declares and speaks to all of us. And as the Navi says, Higid l'cha Adam, Higid l'cha, God takes us by the lapels and says, listen, Higid l'cha, I want to tell you, Adam, as my father explained, what does Hashem want from us? He just wants us to be a mensch. And if you're a mensch, you could do unbelievable things. And how are you a mensch? A person who is what God really, a person who recognizes that it's not what I just do. What does God want from me? Ki'im hasois mishpat, to do what's right and just, whether people are looking or whether they're not, just to do right because it's right. V'avas chesed, and to recognize that it's not just the doing of kindnesses or loving kindnesses to others, but that is my vocation. That is my passion. That's what I love. It's not just chesed, it's avas chesed. This is my defining value. And most of all, v'hatzne leches im Hashem Elokecha. To do it because it's right. Not to do it because people are looking, but to do it because it's right. And if you do that, then all of the bracha and all of everything will fall into place. You know, if ever there's a parsha of Chukas, to try and understand what is really incomprehensible. I mean, we live in a world, who would have believed that we're still living, that last year that we would be here? Nobody. And it's been going on, and our lives are different, and it's so incomprehensible. And yet when you look around, you see the difference individuals make, nurses and doctors, the chesed of one person to another. And that is what Hashem really looks at, the hatzne leches in Hashem. You don't have to be in shul necessarily. You don't have to be amongst people in order to serve Hashem. But it could be hatzne leches. It could be in private, in your own home, to live that life of devotion, that life of love, that life of chesed, in every breath you take, in the emunah you have. And by so doing, you can bring bracha. You can make a difference. Every person can just be themselves. Higid l'cha, what does God want? What is Hashem darish mimcha? Higid l'cha adam. He just wants you to be the person that He created you to be. And through that you will bring bracha and hatzlacha and Yirtz Hashem, the refuah and Yeshua that our world needs. And may we all be zeicha to geula shlema and only bracha and hatzlacha for the coming days and for all of the Jewish people and all of humanity. I wish you a good Shabbos, and I hope everyone remains vigil and stays safe. Good Shabbos, everyone.